When the original Three Stooges aired in 1930, it was obviously going to be a big hit. It aired in almost every movie theater. The Three Stooges were only shown in the movie theater for a few years, across the country. The Three Stooges had began their era on television, had multiple spin-offs, including The Three Stooges with Joe, Moe, and Larry, or The Three Stooges with Moe, Shemp, and Larry. But everyone's favorite was probably The Three Stooges with Curly Howard. Opinions began to change when almost every Three Stooges fan was exposed to one of the most shocking episodes yet. It was 1947, and the episode Half-Wit's Holiday was about to come to theaters. This episode marked the end of Moe, Larry, and Curly era, as Curly had suffered a major stroke on set. Surprisingly, the episode only aired in 2 or 3 theaters in the US, and only a few people had attended the screenings for it. On the 4th day of its release, the film aired on a small suburban neighborhood shopping center. The shopping center had a theater with the latest films of the generation. According to the police, only 3 of the 4 individuals had arrived in the theater to watch a simple screen of what they thought would be Half-Wit's Holiday. It was later revealed that it was much more than that. The episode started off normally with the regular episode would. The title frame slowly faded into view and remained on screen for a good minute. This is when things begin to go airy. The title frame then began to shake violently, then disappeared together. Viewers were then shown a white screen for at least a good 5 minutes and reported quite a ruckus, possibly a struggle of an individual. An alternate title frame would slowly fade into view, and it was simply labeled The Three Stooges, in the small font, with the exception without the faces of the main characters, and music playing in the background. The title frame faded out, and the name of the episode was widely printed across the screen. The words were read Dead Dunderheads for a split second, then abruptly transferred to Dead Dunderheads, and then just to Dead. The screen then quickly transferred to the actual episode. The camera faced a room with no furniture, with the exception of some tarp on the ground, and a ladder in the background. It apparently looked as if the room was being remodeled. A man dressed up as Moe waddles onto the screen reluctantly, wearing a cheap bowl-cut wig that looked as if it was about to fall off. A tag is clearly seen on the back of the wig, whether it was for entertainment purposes or not. The man had a worried look on his face, his eyes darting around the room nervously, his fingers constantly fidgeting. He appeared to be waiting for someone to come on screen. Small murmurs are heard in the background, and after about 30 seconds, a so-called Curly is apparently pushed on screen. Curly was an overweight man with a black eye and multiple cuts on his cheek and scalp. His mouth was slanted downward position, and he looked too nervous. He told Moe to go check on the flooring on the other side of the room. In an unprofessional way, quietly with a couple of words slurred, Moe shuffles off camera, and as soon as he leaves the sight of the camera, a so-called Larry walks onto the screen. This is so hard to be one of the worst of the two. It was a female with her hair messily cut and styled to represent the original Larry from the Three Stooges. During the lines, she would occasionally sob or mispronounce a word or two. Curly tells her that he needs to fix the roof, and points to the ladder. By now, tears are clearly visible streaming down Larry's face. As she hesitates to walk over to the ladder, she finally seems to build up enough courage to climb up the ladder, a few steps onto the ladder, and pretends to work on the roof with a wrench. Curly then bends down and pulls out a toolbox. He reveals that he has multiple sharp, dangerous tools with him, and lays them out onto the tarp. For a few minutes, everything seemed too normal. Around the 3-minute mark, Moe then walks onto the screen, stares at the ladder that Larry is working on, and then heaves a sigh. He slowly walks by the ladder onto the camera, zooms in on his feet. One of his feet gets caught on one of the legs of the ladder, and the ladder is swept from underneath Larry. Moe hits the ground as hard as the ladder comes crashing down. Larry falls onto the ground on top of the ladder, along with a wrench, which hits Moe in the back of the head. Moe appears to spew out blood on the ground, but by the next frame, the blood is gone and Moe is all cleaned up. A look of pain comes into the face of the female Larry. He struggles to stand up, and it appears that he had landed on his wrist. He clenches his wrist tightly as he walks over to Mo, waits for him to stand up, and pokes him in the eyes rather aggressively. Mo cries, "Oh!" and then falls to the ground. His hands covering his eyes, he quickly works himself up to give Larry a death glare and says in a chilling tone, he said in a chilling line, "If you want war, you'll get a war." He smacks Larry up the side of the head, leaving Larry distorted in pain. He crushes Curly out of the way. So anyway, he pushes Curly out of the way, who is finished laying out all of his tools. Mo bends down and picks up a screwdriver. He then trudges over to Larry, who is still hunched over in pain. He then taps Larry's shoulder. Larry looks up and Mo drives the screwdriver into Larry's eye. By now, 3 of the 4 audience members have gotten up to left the theater. Children crying, women shaking in fear. The only remaining audience member was a male in his 20s, an amateur movie maker, studying the art of the movies and television, in so short that one day a film could be in theaters. Sure, he was disgusted, but he had no idea that it was real. He continued to take notes, but the film's violent nature. The 3 audience members have reported to the staff, who assumed that the wrong movie was playing, and also to assume that everyone has left the theater, so they leave the film running. Mo lets go of the screwdriver and puts on a bloody hands all over his eyes, appearing to block out the violence away from his vision. The camera slowly focuses now on Larry. Now crying blood running down his face, Larry drops to the tarp, passes out from the shock. It is unknown if Larry is alive by now, but even if it matters, Mo bends down and yanks the screwdriver out of Larry's eye. The screwdriver possibly penetrated the brain, leaving Larry motionless on the tarp. Mo faces the camera and mutters, "You heartless sick bat." The film is obviously edited out, because now a puddle of blood is now formed underneath Larry, and Mo had multiple bruises and cuts on his face by now. The man watching the film later complained to the authorities that the film began to get fuzzy and distorted, giving me a headache. A headache indeed. The film appeared to be damaged in the parts of the reel, so as the screen flashes white and black rapidly, leaving the next series of evidence eligible for the next few minutes. After the flashing stops, the audio appears to not work anymore, as it appears that Mo is saying something to Curly, but it's impossible to hear what they were saying. Since the beginning of the white flashing, Mo appears to have new cuts and Curly appears to have a sliced lip. Larry is now obviously dead, but the actors take no notice to him. Mo appears to be sawing some sort of wood with a rusty old saw, and Curly is now hammering some nails into the wall for no apparent reason. As Curly walks across the room to get some nails off screen, he slips on one of those tools that he laid out, reaches for Mo to help him. He accidentally grabs for the saw, scratching his hand vulgarly as he hits the ground with the thud. The audio abruptly begins to work again here, and Curly is now heard whimpering as he claws off screen, leaving a trail of blood. "You fool! Someone could have gotten hurt!" Mo shouts. He scolds Curly when he walks back out of the screen by giving him a sturdy punch to the stomach. A strange look comes up on Curly's face as he bends over and vomits up a little bit of fluid. Small chuckles and snickers were heard in the background as Curly returns, punching the nails on the wall, now breathing heavier as if he was about to burst into tears. About 5 minutes pass and Curly asks for some help from Mo and some more nails on the wall. Mo holds the nail as Curly hammers the nail once more into the wall. You expect Curly to hit Mo on the thumb with a hammer, but luckily this does not happen. Instead, when Mo walks back in sawing more wood, he asks Curly for some help. Curly holds the wooden planks for Mo, who menacingly cuts and deliberately saws the blade, grazing Curly's fingers. Curly quickly draws back away from the furious look on his face, picks up this hammer and swings the hammer into Mo's groin. As Mo falls to the floor, blood had even leaked out of his pants. He gasps for breath as he grabs Curly's leg and begins to bite. Curly gives another swing of the hammer to Mo's hand, leaving it dislocated and the bone snapped. Mo crawls over to where the saw was, and one now on the floor, throws at Curly. The saw blade penetrates Curly's big round belly as blood oozes out of both his stomach and his mouth. He then let go of the hammer, which upons on his toes, making a large echoing cracking sound. Curly begins to mumble gibberish and slurred sentences about toys and sports, then rude remarks about his mother and his private parts. As he talks and faces the camera, blood often then manages to shoot out of his mouth and onto the lens of the camera. During the middle of one of his sentences, he collapses onto the ground, barely even alive, and manages to grab the hammer, still mumbling on about nonsense, and heaves onto it to the last bit of strength at Mo, who is now unconscious. The camera slams into his back, shattering his spine. Curly manages to laugh a little bit, but then passes out from blood loss. Loud laughter is now heard as the film reel decays, leaving a plain white screen. The laughter soon fades out, and one of the men on the audience is left in awe. The police arrive moments later, who manage to seize the film and evacuate the feeder from possible threats. When the police enter the room, where the film has been projected onto the screen, they found a man who supposedly was the one who originally supposed to air Halfwit's Holiday. Tied up intensely, beaten, the man remembers a little, and is worried that the man who tied him up might come back and kill him if he gives out any information to the police. It is obvious that the wounds that the man had taken were not self-inflicted, but he's still a major suspect in the case. The man who had made the film reel said to be a sadistic filmmaker who was addicted to the Three Stooges. The police had no information about him at all, apart from some evidence of the film. Police have a few things to work on in the film. For a few seconds, a shadow appears as a man holding something similar to a clipboard. The shadow then goes out of sight, and the second piece of evidence is the few mistakes he had in the film. He had accidentally revealed one of his tones of voices to the new Snickers, who he had just let out escape from his mouth multiple times. His voice is deep and hollow, and it seemed to have belonged to a white man in his 50s. The third piece of evidence is visible when the man has signaled for something to come in to get him. Letting his hand come into the view of the camera, his hand had multiple scars, wrinkles, and freckles, signaling that he was in his late 50s when the film had aired that day. The actor for Curly was eventually an autistic man, kidnapped from the mental hospital when he had wandered out the front door and down the street. The actor for Mo was a businessman who was addicted to drinking alcohol and doing drugs. He was kidnapped on his way home from work. The actress for Larry was cheating on a cheating wife who had 4 husbands. She was kidnapped while walking to her job. The three had no relations in any way, but police did discover is that they reached for flaws in their lives. The police had assumed that the madman wanted to make life more perfect by erasing all flaws from the human race. The film was shot in a location in a local abandoned office building. The actor for Mo was pronounced dead. The actress for Larry was pronounced dead, but the actor for Curly was in critical condition and was at the verge of death. He slowly recuperated and managed to live for a few more years until he took his own life. He did not tell the police much, but he did what he told was rather helpful. The bad man ran out of the door and dove away. He told one of his friends that he was going far, far away. Police must have been on the lookout all over the country, but there had been no luck. The reward for capturing him was raised about $5 million. Columbia Pictures was notified about this event, but refused to comment on it. A few of the workers quit from Columbia shortly, believing that one of them could possibly have been the sick person who wrote this. As for the amateur filmmaker, he came to be my grandfather, who happened to tell me this whole story. He has been questioned by the authorities as well as the other major factor in this. The man who had filmed it, though, is probably dead. If he was in his 50s, 70 years ago, who else could have been dismissed at the one piece? Well, I'd love to tell you more, but I have to leave. Someone is talking to me about staring into an independent film.